Let's come to England. So here see 6 names, and these 6 names are probably among the greatest poets the English language has ever seen. Okay, we distinguish 2 generations of Romantic poets in England. The first generation consists of those 3 here: William Blake, William Wordsworth, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Okay, William Blake, some people would regard him as being pre-romantic, but yes, I mean, mostly he is regarded as a romanticist. Those other 2, William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, they were friends for a long time. I mean, they had a fallout later in life, but they were friends in the beginning of their careers. And those 2 together published the most influential Romantic manifesto, if you like, of all times, the Lyrical Ballads. I talked about it before, or a joint production by Wordsworth and Coleridge. Okay, the first generation, they all, well, died in their older years. Okay, well, Coleridge was 62, but the other 2, well, in their 80s. The second generation, just the opposite. They died very young. I mean, this is the generation led by Lord Byron, whose normal name is George Gordon, but usually you would find him under Lord Byron, but he was Christian named George Gordon. Percy Bysshe Shelley, who married Mary Godwin, who became Mary Shelley, and later on wrote Frankenstein. Okay, that is the connection here with Mary Shelley. Okay, and John Keats, who died being only 26 years old. So if you look at the second generation, I mean, they all died in their 20s or 30s. Okay. If you were to ask people 200 years ago, okay, well, say 190 years ago, something like that, who is or who was the greatest Romantic poet of all times, they would certainly have said Lord Byron. Okay. Today, people would say William Wordsworth. There was a change in Byron reception, or there had been a change, or still is one going on. But still, the most successful of those, at least as far as sales are concerned, is certainly Lord Byron. Okay, my favorite, by the way, but still today, Wordsworth is the most emblematic of those. Okay, the last generation, by the way, the final generation, they all died in Europe. Shelley and Keats died in Italy, and Lord Byron died in Greece, trying to help the Greeks against the Turks, okay, when the Greeks rebelled against Turkish occupation. A lot of people went there, Europeans, to support the Greeks against the Turks, okay, in those days. All right, so if I were you, I'd know these 2 generations of Romantic poets. I would like to concentrate on William Wordsworth, okay, first of all, because he's the most influential today, and because he also wrote a preface to the Lyrical Ballads, to the second edition of the Lyrical Ballads. The first edition is 1798, the second edition 1802, and this is probably the most important theoretical text of Romantic times, telling you what Romantic literature is like and what it should be like. It's Wordsworth's manifesto for Romantic poetry, and it's a long tractate, but I've just gleaned a few passages here which I would like to read with you. Okay, where he says, and I've already bold printed the important nominal phrases here. The principal objects, then, which I proposed to myself in these poems was to choose, and now we go, incidents and situations from common life. Mark that. Okay, this is what Romantic poetry is about. Incidents and situations from common life, not as in the 18th century, great politics or Greeks' gods and goddesses or something like this, which they had. No, I mean situation from common life in the country mostly. And Wordsworth writes a lot about people. I mean, he writes about children who I don't know, talk to one another about play, about even people like a leech gatherer, somebody who gathers leeches in the woods, okay, the poorest of the poor. I mean, here we go, yeah, incidents and situations from common life. That's the main point, first point. Then, and to relate or describe them throughout, as far as possible, in a selection of language really used by men. A very important point here, language really used by men, and we have to talk about that in detail. In the 18th century, the language they used in poetry was very elitist. Okay, very elitist. They talked about, I mean, they very Latinized, yeah, very Greek way of learned language, full of metaphors and similes and allegories and something like that. He doesn't want that. He says, I mean, speak the way we are used to. Speak the way ordinary people do. Language really used by men. Yeah? So what we do, we call this in the 18th century poetic diction. You can write that. Poetic diction they used. And Wordsworth says, no poetic diction. I don't want that. I don't want language which only exists in poetry. I want language that everybody understands and everybody is able to speak. And therefore, yes, Wordsworth poems and romantic poems in general, well, probably with the exception of Lord Byron, they are use a language which is very accessible. Okay, language really used by men. Just, I mean, in the 18th century poetry, if the sun rose, they would have said something. Now the sun is rising, okay, and Aurora, after having kissed her aged husband Tithonus, good morrow mounts the canopy with her fiery steeds, and you see the flash of light, something like this. Wordsworth would have said, the sun rose. Okay, here we go. Okay, so next point, language really used by men. Third point, and at the same time to throw over them and here a certain coloring of imagination, which means, yeah, you have incidents from common life which you color by imagination. And we talked about imagination, this transformative process, and he says what imagination is, whereby ordinary things should be presented to the mind in an unusual way. And this is what imagination does. Imagination presents ordinary things in an unusual way. Okay, starting from a tree and then describing the tree as wow, yeah, whatever. Yeah, and further and above all, to make these incidents and situations interesting by tracing in them, truly, though not ostentatiously, the primary laws of nature. And here we go, nature, okay, chiefly as far as it regards the manner in which we associate ideas in a state of excitement. And that's the thing, yeah, state of excitement. It has to be, there is some excitement in seeing these things in an unusual way, okay. Yeah, this is what poetry should be like according to William Wordsworth, okay. Common life, life in the country, real language, and color them by imagination. Okay? Get excited about it, these things. Let's go on from here. And then he says, low and rustic life was generally chosen. That's it. Low and rustic life. Life of the peasants. Life of the poor people, of ordinary people. People like you and me are not great politicians, kings, queens, whatever. Because in that condition, the essential passions of the heart find a better soil in which they can attain their maturity, are less under restraint, and speak a plainer and more emphatic language. Okay? Because in that condition of life, rustic life, our elementary feelings coexist in a state of greater simplicity. And that's the thing, simplicity. This is what they seek, simplicity. And consequently, maybe more accurately contemplated and more forcibly communicated. Simple things which concern everybody, the human condition, and not things, as in the great cities, which only concern a small fraction of the population. These simple things in low and rustic life, okay, these are the things which concern everybody. Okay, And then the most important catchphrase, yeah, that was ever used in Romanticism. And if you should know something by heart, it's Wordsworth's definition of poetry. Okay, say that. This is something one should know by heart. When he says, "I've said that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and it takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility." Something builds up in you, powerful feelings, and suddenly these feelings burst out. Okay? And this is what they do in tranquility. Tranquility in quietness. When you're alone. I mean, you walk the countryside and you get in all these sense impressions, and these feelings, they build up, and then suddenly they burst out. So if I were you, I would know poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. This is the most famous definition of poetry in world literature, believe me. That's what you should know. The emotion is contemplated till by a species of reaction, and tranquility the tranquility gradually disappears, and an emotion kindred to that which was before the subject of contemplation is gradually produced and does itself actually exist in the mind. And that's the thing, yeah? Everything that was outside suddenly exists in the mind. Yeah? You get in sense impressions and they form your mind. We will have that in a minute. Okay? Your mind is the thing. Wordsworth uses mind, heart, and soul synonymously. It could be your heart, it could be your soul, your mind, whatever. Okay? Emotions recollected, and they change you, transform you. Well, again, imagination, that's a transformative process. In this mood, successful composition generally begins. Okay? Only through the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, this is what you put on paper. This is successful composition, which means you cannot plan it. No, you may sit there waiting for your spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It never comes. Well, you just let it out. Just leave it the way it is. Okay? It's not something that can be contemplated or planned. It's something you wait for. Well, it will come eventually to a great genius like William Wordsworth. Okay? Right. I would like to stop here, have the main points of the Preface to Lyrical Ballads, okay, and do know this world-famous definition of poetry. It's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings in tranquility. Okay? Which means you get back, you sit alone at home, and suddenly it bursts out of you without you even probably being aware of. And then suddenly, oh yeah, here it is. And then you take pen in hand and write it down. Okay, that's romantic poetry. Okay, be right back.